Many thanks, Joseph Olsen, for that background. Now, joining us for this conversation, we, of course, are having two guests who were with us a couple of weeks ago when we touched on aspects of governance, in particular with regard to local governments. From our Kaduna Network Center today, we have Professor Muhammad Kabir Isa. He is a professor of governance in the Department of Local Government and Development Studies at Ahmadu Bello University. Professor Kabir Isa, delighted to have you again this morning.
Nigeria, and it's a pleasure to be on Good Morning Nigeria once more.
Okay, and from our Port Harcourt studio, an old hand with us on Good Morning Nigeria. It's been quite a while, but delighted to welcome him this morning. Festus Oguche is a constitutional lawyer and social advocate. Pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on this hot podium this morning. Thank you a lot.
And with us in the Abuja studio here is Honorable Abdullahi Adamu Candido, Executive Chairman, Abuja Municipal Area Council. It's a delight to have you on Good Morning Nigeria this morning.
It's my pleasure. Good morning, Nigerians.
And here also we have Honorable Itiako Ikpopo. He is former Chairman, Association of Local Governments of Nigeria, Algon, in Delta State, and presently the Chief of Staff to the President of Algon. I hope I mentioned that name properly.
Yes, you did. I'll pay for that.
Don't worry.
By the way, the Honorable was also with us a couple of weeks ago when we touched on this subject. He was with us via Zoom from Asaba. He's from Isoko, and his name is Itiako Ikpopo, as we said on that occasion.
Very correct. And I said I'll pay for it. Good morning, Nigerians.
Pleasure to have you all guys. But of course, we are in pretty very serious times, and the issue on the lips of virtually everyone who is concerned about our current state and where to go is restructuring. As you listen to that background report, there are different perspectives to restructuring. But let's begin with our guests. And Festus Oguche, who is a lawyer with us from our Port Harcourt studios. We know that there are different definitions or perspectives to restructuring. Tell us what you consider to be the most salient aspects of restructuring that should be engaging us at this time.
Thank you very much for that question. It's not just raising the issues of restructuring. Restructuring can translate to reorganization. It's a little not the same or similar with reforms. But then the brand of restructuring that should be focused on this time is the one that will create a very strong and unified entity in terms that some of the cracks that we have in the system could be closed, and some of the issues that arise that deal with the forces of centrifugalism, those that want to secede and those who are demanding for secession, kept at bay. We cannot be talking about restructuring and talking about secession at the same time. These are two different things. And it's not just the idea of talking about it. It's the idea of the actual manner that the internal structure will be reorganized and on what basis, on what pedestal. These are very, very salient areas that should be looked at. Are we looking at it from the point of view of the existing component structure? No, it cannot be, because a lot of the states that make up that structure cannot even fend for themselves, except, unless upon their reliance with the center. Are we looking at it from the point of view of giving some shade of authority to states, more legislative lists? From legislative lists, at least a whole lot of the lists on the exclusive legislative list will be transferred to the states, and we have a concurrent list and a residual list. Yes, we can look at it from that perspective. And I think that's where all the hues and cries will settle. At the end of the day, it's not just beating the drums of war. You want to take this way, you want to go that way. It's not an easy thing, even if you are explaining or trying to place your activities on the predication that you have a right to self-determination. The African Commission on Human Rights have said in the Katanga case that it is not your right per se. You can only exercise it within the framework of the existing entity in which you are. The country Nigeria has existed for quite some time, and I know that the persons that formulated the idea of this country, they meant very well for a country that is strong and virile to emerge out of black Africa. And we also know very well that in spite of the fact that the British authorities also meant for their own administrative convenience, Nigeria came up a very strong democracy in the world. If you read Frederick Lord Lugard's book, The Dual Mandate, he explained it quite very well. And it came out quite in a very proper form. The only thing we've had cases of poor leadership and cases of poor followership as well, and a lot of contradictions here and there, which will not be blamed on the structure, but rather on us as Nigerians. Kingsley.
Well, thank you, Festus Soguche. Moving to Kaduna, let's hear from Professor Muhammad Kabir Issa. You are in the Ivory Tour. Of course, your students and a lot of Nigerians are watching this program right now. Share with us your thoughts about what restructuring means to you and what you tell your students, in relation to what you hear people say, what they mean, and what they really postulate as restructuring in this country.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on Good Morning Nigeria once more. Restructuring as a concept is not new to Nigeria and is not a recent phenomenon going back into history. The nationalist struggle for independence was a struggle for restructuring Nigeria, unlike what was obtainable elsewhere in Africa for independence struggle. We had two types of independence struggle, the armed struggle and the negotiated independence struggle. So restructuring, going back to it, has is multidimensional and multifaceted. You have economic restructuring, you can talk about political restructuring, you can talk about socio-cultural restructuring of an entity. Now, restructuring means that realigning existing structures to meet a wider objective. For instance, Nigeria's population by 1960 was about 45 million. Today, Nigeria's population is estimated to be about 211 million. Now, the structures we inherited from independence, either economic structures, political structures, sociocultural structures, are they meeting the yearnings and aspirations of the people? Are they meeting the desired objectives for which these structures were established? If not, then we need to go back to the drawing board, revisit this structure, realign, reshape, somewhere put down, some places put up, and some parts jettison other parts and put up new structures to meet that wider objective for which Nigeria was established, which is, of course, unity, faith, and, of course, progress of the people, in a much more condensed format, going by the coat of arms of Nigeria. So when we talk about restructuring, are we referring to political restructuring? Because economic restructuring has been going on, especially with the introduction of the structural adjustment program in the 1980s, the full-fledged pursuant of the neoliberal policy of reforming the economy, liberalization, opening up of the economy, free enterprise, and so on and so forth. So that has been ongoing. Now, at the political level is where we have challenges. Our political structures and institutions are, in essence, not meeting the yearnings and aspirations of the people in Nigeria. And the point of that is that Nigeria has an estimated almost 500 ethnic groups and about 300 languages. Now, you need to have a structure of representation and participation that ensures greater engagement and involvement of people at all levels of decision, be that at the federal level, or at the state level, or at the local government level. I'll give you an instance, for example. There are places up till now, since 1999, elections have not taken place in part of Nigeria, particularly in Taraba, for example. In Usa and Taku local government, there are territories where elections have not taken place at all since 1999. That is a hotspot of violence and insecurity in Nigeria. And the landscape of Nigeria is dotted with a lot of spots. The border territories, some part of the hinterlands, elections and what you call governance and semblance of governance have not reached the far-flung. Now, with creation of states came new form of domination and new form of minorities. So we need to revisit a whole lot of structures. Now, is our democracy delivering on the purpose for which we had democracy? We moved from parliamentary system of government to presidential system of government in 1979. From 79 to date, with the exception of the little hiccups, military interregnum, are we, in the last 25 years, having democracy, delivering on the dividends of democracy to meet the yearnings and the aspiration of the majority of the people of called Nigeria, not the minority that are dominant, but the majority that are underrepresented. So restructuring here means looking at the wider political process and the structures and the values and institutions in place. Again, I'll highlight this. We have political parties. But are the Nigerian political parties behaving like the pristine, mundane political parties all over the world? Nigerian elites are quick to make reference to America. Is our Nigerian political system a model, for example, of the American political system? Is the local government, for example, in Nigeria, operating like the local government system in America? Is the state functioning like the states in America? But from my understanding, federalism as operated in America and elsewhere are not the same. There are no one single type, common type federalism all over the world. All countries that are federal have evolved their federal system along certain historical path. And that is my trajectory in understanding the history of Nigeria, that our federalism must grow, factoring our historical antecedent and precedents and where we intend to go in the next 20 years. Unfortunately, we have elites who emanate from the 50s when they were 20 years old and are now saying we should go back to 1950 for people who are 20 years old. And unfortunately, we have young people who are not engaged and involved in determining their own future. Because this same elite were the ones who determined where Nigeria is today when they were 20 years ago, when they were in their mid-20s and in their mid-30s. And in their mid-70s and 80s, they want to tell us what Nigeria should look like in the next 20, 30 years. So we need to have the youth engage the system. Because, for example, Obafemi Awolowo, by the time they started engaging the colonial government, they were in their mid-20s. And by the time of independence, they were in their early 40s and their 50s. And so we need to have the young determining where Nigeria will be in the next 30 years. And let me also emphasize, Nigeria's population by the year 2050 will be 400 million, and it will be the fourth or fifth most populous country in the world. So Nigeria should be the beacon of African unity. If we unify Nigeria today and build it on a foundation of unity, we become the beacon of unity in Africa and the lighthouse of African development in the next 30 years.
Professor Kabir, thank you very much there for your opening salvo. We certainly will return to you in the course of the conversation. Both yourself and Uguchi have made very useful points to lead us into the heart of this conversation. Well, with us here in the Abuja studios, let's bring in now Honorable Ikpopo. Give us your own perspective on restructuring and what should be our chief concern now in seeking to achieve whatever the ends of restructuring are.
Well, first, listening to Prof, I think he's given a broad perspective of what restructuring is. And for us in Algon, it's important, under the leadership of Kolade Alabi in the last couple of years. I want to situate restructuring as it relates to local government. And I have insisted over the years that restructuring is key and continuous in the process we are in. And what was obtainable 20 years ago is not obtainable today in this country. Social culture has evolved, economic culture has evolved, political culture has evolved. In the local government system, which I think is the foundation of any democracy or democratic process, the strangulation is becoming too much and they are unable to function in the highest capacity to help the states and federal government obtain full implementation of development as a country. Now, I say that with relation to all that is happening in the country today, from the agitations to the banditry and all of that. It is because if you look at it deeply, the local governments are not functioning. And we are saying that even in your report, if you look at your report, the report was talking more about the states, devolving power to the states. No, we are saying devolving power to the states and local governments. If you talk about state police, you talk about community policing. These are key. It existed before, native authority and all of that. So for us in the local government, in Algon, our point of departure is that local government restructuring is very key and as important as state restructuring. And we must devolve powers to these arms and tiers of government in such a way that it helps them breathe well, it helps them function well, and it helps them. Look, it's just like you want to build a house. In building that house, you must ensure that the soil is good. And that soil is local government. Because if you don't build well on it, it will collapse. And we are a good soil. We have my colleague here, Candido. Candido can be anything in this country. We have capacity in the local government system in the country, both the civil servants and the political class. And so it pains you where you find a governor asking chairmanship candidates to write an exam. Who asked them to write exams as governors? Who asked them to write exams as governors? That is how they have debased local government system. But they can also learn from some governors who are doing well with their local governments. And I say this with all sense of humility, because if you look deeply, and I think you need to do reports in local governments, NTA, because people watch this program, you need to go to local government and see what's happening. We are in the process of ensuring that the entire Nigerian structure is in our hands. Primary health care is the function of local governments. So if primary health care has failed in Nigeria, it's because the primary health care of the local government has failed. And you ask why? Financing. The finances are not there. Everybody wants to take from the local government. The states wants to capture the healthcare system. The federal government wants to capture the healthcare system. So what does the chairman do? UBEC is already doing contracts and asking states to bring 50%. A chairman should be able to say, look, I want to renovate this school and this school and this school for this year. And next year we'll continue. We have chairmen who have 2 years as their tenure, 6 months as their tenure. Why can we not be guaranteed 4 years tenure? So these are fundamental issues that need to be dealt with. And until they are looked at, the truth of the matter is that the issues of restructuring cannot stop at the states. The larger proportion of restructuring must start from the local government. Okay. And until that is done, we may not be able to move forward. We'll just run in circles as a country.
All right, thank you. Ichapo, Ikpopo, I'll keep rehearsing this name because I need much money.
But you're doing well.
I'll need much money from you.
But you're doing well, sir.
It seems like every announcement.
You're getting it right.
Yes.
Honorable Abdullahi Adamu Candido.
Yes, sir.
You've had all the, the definitions, the conceptualizations, the perspectives of restructuring. And Ikpopo here added to the fact that local governments have been strangulated. They've not been allowed to perform maximally. And that is why the restructuring should start, because that's the foundation of democracy. Do you buy into that idea? Are we really looking at restructuring holistically from the point of view of the foundation, which is the local government, or where do we start from?
Thank you, Nadabo. Thank you, Nigerians. I think this is the best time we can, look at our country and face the reality and say it the way it should be. Nigeria as a nation totally is in a fix. And until solutions are found, I wouldn't know exactly where we're heading to. My senior colleague here has just said it all. Every structure of a building, for instance, must have a foundation. The foundation for this country starts and begins, of course, or ends with local government. Because this is where you have the most populous citizens of this country domiciling. Unfortunately, quote and unquote, intimidation, bringing down all that has to do with local government has always been the bane of what I have experienced in the last 5 years of my stay as chairman of a council. And we can't get it right if we try to, forget that local government is where the foundation has to start. Now, for instance, and I think Nigerians will agree with me, a head of state, a state governor, comes from one small unit linked to a local government, where his forebears, his brothers, his sisters, uncles, nephews, cousins, all reside, looking up for social facilities or amenities. They can't get it from the presidency. Certainly, they could also not get it from the state government. They can only attract it from the local government. And it is the local government that is being intimidated. It is the local government that they don't want it to function. So where do we start? So if you are talking of restructuring should be an all-inclusive thing. It should start from the local government, because that is where the system begins, and that is where it attracts whatever Nigerian will wish to have as development. If we miss development as a local government, sincerely, we are going to miss it completely everywhere or anywhere you think you can get development. A governor who looks down at local government, my senior colleague just said it, does a governor think he cannot even start from a local government? Do you know that a local government, once a local government chairman preside over affairs of a council for 4, 5, 6 years, I am telling you, he can manage this country better. Unfortunately, they are talking about restructuring, and someone, like the Senate President just said, he give it to them. Why not start from your state? Restructure your state. Start from the local government. Show example, so that people can really be, convinced as to where you want us to, where you want to take us to. I come from the Federal Capital Territory. Agitations here and there. The little silence you are hearing from FCT, possibly maybe because of our population, our size, and because of the influx of Nigerians already in the city here, has closed the eyes of the FCT people. The honest truth remains that in the whole country today, unless we look at agitations from all segments of the society, it will not lead us to anywhere good. Let me cite an example from FCT. Why I come? Because you need to say an example from where you're coming from. As a citizen of this country, I am only a citizen that is stateless. Stateless. If you know how you fought apartheid in South Africa, that is what the FCT person is passing through. And you want the FCT person to keep quiet when others are enjoying whatever you can call service. You are from Delta. I am from FCT. The only thing I can look up to is becoming a councillor or a local government chairman. And the chairmanship is being competed by all Nigerians. I don't have a say. And you want me to keep quiet. So you need to, bring everything. That is why I say it should be all-inclusive. There are lots of agitations. People wanting to divide the country. Everybody wants to live. Why do you want to live? It's because something is wrong. So I want to call on the National Assembly in particular.
Before you make the call, Candido,
yes,
let's hear from you again at this point that you made this point. Let's hear from you the agitations, because the restructuring thing is not just coming out of the blues. It's being prompted by certain actions, all right? There is this banditry, insurgency, lack of representation, economic, alienation, and the rest of them. At the FCT, in the FCT, what are the agitations that are put forward that makes you think that you're more or less like in an apartheid situation?
Good. I've just said it now. That because Abuja became the seat of government. And there were people more than 200 years ago here. FCT, or the city for the federal capital city, is not more than 50 years old. But there are people here over 200 years ago. Now you came, took over everything of theirs. Like I said, I'm a resident, an indigenous of the Federal Capital Territory for that matter. But I don't have authority over what belongs to me ancestrally. That is one. The people are feeling bad. They are feeling, somehow being submerged into becoming nothing. Yeah. They are beginning to feel, then what is it that we have contributed to this country that we are now being intimidated, that we are now being forced out of our own territory? You understand my point? If I cannot own my land, and then somebody from Bayelsa, somebody from Katsina, somebody from Adamawa came over and just get a piece of paper and call it an allocation paper, and then he come to my own father's land to say, I have been allocated a land in your own father's land, and then you go about to sell it for 500 million naira, certainly to some extent, 1 billion naira, and then I am told not to have anything to do with that land. That is suppression. That is taking me to look as if I don't even belong to this country. That agitates minds. And that is not going to be good for us. Because for those of us who may not have gone to proper school, our children are now going to school. And if they go to school and acquire education, those of us who are coming to build mansions in the city here, tomorrow, it could be something dangerous for them. So we have to do everything possible to listen to agitations. It starts there. Indeed, this restructuring is political move. We need to look at it from the context of our political behavior. Let every citizen, majority, minority, let everybody be considered. Listen to people. Let them voice out. Let them come out to say, this is our issues, or these are our issues. Let us collectively come together to find solutions to them. Else, I am being frank, that Nigeria may be turning to something else. And I will not pray for that. But these are certainly some issues that really need to be attended to so that we can have a holistic nation that everybody will be proud of.
Wow. Thank you very much, Honorable Candido. Two major planks that you have touched on. One on dealing with agitations, and therefore you're suggesting that hear what people are saying, listen to them, and then respond to their yearnings. The other, of course, also relates to an emphasis of what Honorable Ikpopo earlier said. That's to say, recognizing the foundational role of local governments and thereby ensuring that you build on that and then restructure that particular tier of government, which is why we're going back now to Festus Oguche in our Port Harcourt network studios. Mr. Festus Oguche, well, in one of your earlier submissions, you did say that sometimes at the end of the day, depending on the route that one is taking on the restructuring highway, you end up with saying, how do we reconfigure the legislative lists, whether exclusive or the concurrent and residual. And the point has now been made and is still being made that it isn't just enough merely to take items from the exclusive list and then get them onto the concurrent list, which on its own probably would mean more powers in the hands of state governments, but that crucially, the relationship between states and local governments, and indeed the relationship involving all tiers of government, local, state, and federal, has to be taken a look at. And that the tier that needs even more empowerment now is the local government. And unfortunately, the strangulation has been very well described by our other guests. What are your thoughts on this?
Very much, Kingsley. I think your question earlier had to do with my own perspective as to the salient issues or salient areas of restructuring. And that was why I narrowed it to that end. About the local government, I think it's a very sorry state, and we've not been very very valiant in terms of our definition of what the local government system should be. If you look at the metamorphosis which is passed through from the county council era to the divisional era until now, we have local government areas and local government councils. And we had a series of reforms, the Commission on Local Government Reforms and all manner of restructurals and reorganizations that are going on there. It will be very, very proper for anybody to say that we have not reached that particular end upon which local governments are anchored. It is the government that is very closer to the people, and it deals with the grassroots, and I very much agree with my colleague on the other side that if you are talking about restructuring, we should start from there. But then if you want to do a comprehensive restructure of the Nigerian system, then we have to talk about intra and interpersonal restructuring because a whole lot of these bans that we are going through are the function of our political character. I'm talking about the political elites and maybe their overzealousness and certain acts of desperation that puts all these things to a very, very disfavorable end. The local government system has not been very, very okay as far as I'm concerned. I think Professor Ben Wabuize likened it to a structure of government that's existing as an integral part of the state structure. That's what it's supposed to be because they exist within state structure. But then, if you are talking about a structure in that area, then we are looking at the areas of autonomy, the areas of independence. I remember that this current government had made moves to grant them that bit of autonomy in the area of financial autonomy, and they got a big rebuff from the governors. They have their own interests, by the way. That's why I talked about intra and interpersonal restructuring before we advance to the larger stable of restructuring of the entire system. But then if you are talking about restructuring in itself, they must be as comprehensive and detailed as possible, because you cannot talk about devolving powers from the center to the component units without talking about the local government. The local government is not per se a tier of government, but it can be obliged to function in that manner if you go into the nitty-gritty of understanding their perspectives, their functions, their composition, which have all been handed over to the House of Assembly of a state, which makes the existence rather very precarious, because you now have a situation where it is now becomes an appendage of politicians at the legislature and the executive at the state level, and a whole lot of things are not being properly. Sorry.
A whole lot of things. Cut out there. Festus.
Yeah, somebody are calling.
Yeah, Festus. While you were trying to deal with that little piece that...
I think he's...
Yeah. All right, Mr. Festus Oguche, we'll allow you land, and then, of course, we'll get back to another guest.
Restructure. We want to restructure the system. It must be holistic and entire. While we are talking about restructuring the federation, there must also be focus in restructuring the internal structures of the state and the local government areas. I don't think they go together. They go pari passu. There are efforts at constitutional amendment. If it could take care of some of these agitating areas, I think that should be okay. But then if there are certain final details that need to be put in proper perspectives, particularly in the local government system, then these are things that we should look at it properly. Because democracy is all about participation. And one of the key factors that make that participation necessary is the extent to which people's voices are heard. The gentleman of the FCT had just raised very, very important issues, which ordinarily we would have been ignoring all this while. But from the way and manner he spoke, we can see that they have certain indices within the structure of local governments at the FCT. They call them area councils that need to be addressed. And I am saying that it is not only peculiar to the FCT alone, it's something that's pervading the entire system of the local governments, because the idea of having local government systems where there's a serious alienation between the people and the local government itself is neither here nor there. It doesn't pander very well to the interests of the system. And again, the idea of having a local government system that's directly under the control of state executives makes nonsense of the whole thing. Permit my word. But What is important is that the existing structures within the local government system that tend to put them under siege and make them helplessly annexed to state structures has to be divided, had to be eliminated as much as possible to give them that functional status that will make them autonomous and independent. And also, the involvement of the people in the governance in a democratic system is very key and primary to the consideration of the level of democratic and constitutional exactions that the populace can be appropriately be said to have been involved themselves. But you see that if you have a democratic system that is totally, completely alienated from the people itself, it creates a very big problem. So we may not have problem of restructuring. We may not have problem with the constitution itself. And that's my thesis earlier on, that we may have problem essentially with ourselves, the way we go about the business of the democratic system. And you see that some of the poachers you get from the political elite tend to give you some reminiscence of reminiscence of the military days, brutality, on civil disposition in handling the matters of state and whatnot. But at the end of the day, what is important is that if you are to sit and discuss or talk about any iota of restructuring, it must be comprehensive. It has to start from anywhere. It can start from the local government system. It can start from the top. But it must be essentially comprehensive. Comprehensive in the sense that all the agitations, all the anger, all the angst, all the marginalizations, and if you're talking about restructuring, you're talking about the gender issues are also there, and they have to be structured into the system appropriately. So it has to be very, very holistic, and if we have a particular focus on the local government system, then of course we have to amend the constitution to give it that entire whole that will make it very functional and very, very properly established.
Many thanks, Festus Oguche. Professor Mohammed Kabir, we're running short of time, and I really want to advise you that we try, or rather we ask you to at least keep your thoughts short and simple. I mean, restructuring is not new in Nigeria. It dates back to colonial days. And of course, through the, the independence era to the military interregnum and through to, civilian democracy to date, it has been work in progress. And same can also be said of federalism, which is also work in progress. The developed countries who might have gone rather through this kind of process must have reached through years and painstaking efforts in trying to see to it that they meet the earnings and demands of their people, which they really enjoy at the moment. In your own opinion, which aspects of the Nigerian state and the Nigerian people needs restructuring immediately? Talking about the agitations that are now really reaching the rooftops.
My take on this is that the area which needs urgent restructuring in Nigeria is going back to the local government, which is the foundation of our democracy. It is historical. The local government predates the state government. In the 1914 arrangement, it was the national colonial government and the local government, the native authority. The states came into existence in 1947 with its precursor, the regional government under Richard's Constitution of 1946. So the local government predates. In fact, nationalism and nationalist agitation for democratization of Nigerian politics started at local government level, where the young Nigerians who are educated in Britain wanted greater participation in the local civil service. And then they wanted equality of participation with the foreign civil servants who tend to earn more than the Nigerian civil servant trained abroad. So these were the basis of nationalist agitation and nationalist demand for restructuring. Now, coming back to date, the executive order signed by the president means a lot of things. At the local government level, I will not go into the legislative order and the judicial autonomy order. I will restrict myself to the local government order. Where does it start? First, the state government who are committed to restructuring, who are committed to implementing restructuring, must first and foremost counsel prohibit or remove the Ministry for Local Government, and in its place, put in place a Directorate for Local Government Inspection. Secondly, they must rejig and reinvigorate the Office of the Auditor General for Local Government, equip it, empower it, and give it more men to work, because the Auditor General for Local Government must do quarterly auditing, and he must do biannual auditing, and must do annual auditing. And his report must go to the state government, and must go to the State House of Assembly, and must go to the EFCC and the ICPC and the NFIU in that. So autonomy for local government means also that you give the local government their due right. State government, by the Constitution, section 162, subsection 5, 6, 7, and 8, and empowers the state to allocate certain percentage of their internally generated revenue to local government wallet, like the one accruing from the federation account to the local government wallet at the state level, where it is shared in the state-local joint account. The state government do not give that amount of money, the 10% of their internally generated revenue every month. Rather, they come with fictitious joint account and siphon local government money by all means necessary. Very importantly, at the political level, the state governors must allow the political parties, and the political parties allow the local citizens elect their representatives, either as chairmen or councillors. They should not stifle the process. They should not strangulate the process, because that's what's happening. Governors determine who becomes chairman, who becomes councillor. Elite also are involved. The local structure, the local elite structure at the local level strangulates the process, therefore stifling participation. And this increases agitation or secessionism. And that's why, for me, any secessionist agitation that does not lead to armed struggle is a political statement which must be looked into. I don't see it as something dangerous. As long as it did not transmutate into armed struggle, then it is something worth listening to. The Constitution of Nigeria is not a major problem. I tend to align myself with the former Minister of Aviation, Chidoka. The Constitution of Nigeria allows for a true federal structure in place. But what we have are Nigerian elite and politicians who are still yet to shed their shell of military rule. Most of them were under military rule and are yet to shape military authoritarian rule in a democratic setting. And that's why some academics believe that Nigeria is not democratic, it's only operating a civilian administration. We've moved from military administration to civilian administration. So for me, restructuring will be, how do we move civilian administration to a democratic administration? Having very strong political parties at local level, which are independent, and then having strong government structures that are representative and participatory enough at the local level. And therefore, the states too are supposed to be very democratic, open, and therefore, when these processes are enshrined and in place in our society, then we will move forward. So in other words, we have a challenge of our political culture. Our political culture is de-development, is backward, retrogressive. And in terms of our political attitude, both at the elite level and the followership, the leadership level and the followership. But the bulk of the problem is at the leadership level.
Thank you very much, Professor Kabir Issa. We just want to get the thoughts of the other guests before we bring in our second topic. But of course, this is a very significant point that you gentlemen have been raising. Once again, Honorable Ipopo, let's just, while we're talking about aspects of restructuring, we do know that there is interconnectedness. Professor Issa was talking earlier about, say, look, how you strengthen the local government system. You have an office of the Auditor General for the local government, whose report is supposed to go to the State House of Assembly, but we do know the state of the State Houses of Assembly. A good number of them are prostrate. In other words, they have no mind of their own, because they are said to be under the control of the state chief executives. A number of local governments, chairmen and councillors are also said to have been handpicked. Now, is financial autonomy sufficient to attain efficiency at the local government level? Or should we also get back into what we tried to raise 2 weeks ago, again we were pressed for time on that occasion, to say that in looking at the local government system, the recruitment process into the chairs, the chairman, the councillor, we also have to think about how elections are conducted. Because the view widespread is that state independent electoral commissions have been woeful in their performance because they do not appear to exercise that independence that they ordinarily would exercise. So tell us, from your perspective, what we need to do in terms of just scaling over the issue of financial autonomy or financial independence, but more particularly how you recruit persons to run the local governments.
Well, in Algon, we are worried about the processes. Yesterday, coincidentally, the Director General, Hajia Binta Bello, the Deputy President, Shehu Marshall from Kebbi, we had a meeting, and we tried to look at the issues concerning the constitutional review, because we're also doing a position, and some of these issues came up. I think that most speakers about local government don't know what's happening in local government. And I'm happy my brother is here. Truth of the matter is that I insist that the local government system has a lot of the best hands. Now, the autonomy we seek is both political, financial, and all of it. Because in recruiting people, for instance, it is the Local Government Service Commission that recruits people. As chairman, you don't have the authority. In posting, you don't have the authority to post. It's the Local Government Service Commission. So in a way, technically, any civil servant that decides to be very abusive or irresponsible can do to you. But you see, I also don't want a blanket on all the state governors, because there are state governors who are showing example. And I say it with all sense of responsibility. One of them is, I'll use my state as an example, is Governor Kowa. First of all, he doesn't believe in caretaker government. He does not believe that any local government should be run by caretaker administration. Secondly, because he's constrained by the Constitution, he must sit in jack. If not, he keeps telling me, because he has to argument where we cannot fund the joint. I'll give you a typical example of local government that I used to run. My wage bill was 60 million for workers. Teachers, 130 million when I came in. My receipts from FAC, outside the statutory deductions, 1% to Local Government Service Commission, I pay traditional rulers. You understand? Outside those was maybe 200 million. If you do the calculation, I am short of 45 million. Governor Kowa is one of the governors that gives 10% back, and the records are there, because we need to do a lot of investigation. Even at that, I am short of maybe 30 million, 35 million. You know what he does? We go to him and say, Your Excellency, these 12 local governments cannot pay salaries. He doesn't believe you should cut workers' salaries. And so what does he do? He goes to state coffers and gives to you. He's tired. And I said, these are people who should drive this process. But it's just one voice. You will not see any chairman come out on national television and say that his governor is not doing what is right. It's not possible. And so we're aggregating and engaging the Governors Forum in seeing how possible it is for us to begin to reflect back on the need for local government to function properly. Another example is Primary Healthcare Development Agency. If I don't have receipts enough to pay salaries in a month, how do I run the primary healthcare centers? I need to run back to the states. We must stop depending on the states. If somebody has just bought a car, why should he go to Asaba if I'm from Ole to number his plates? Every local government should be able to say, look, go to the registration center. The revenue from that registration comes to me. And then we pay something so that we can all have our areas of interest and revenue.
You should also be registering Okadas.
We should be, yes, and keke. And if possible, those who trek on the road.
No, because motorbikes are very important now.
But the truth matters. We need to sit down. And I like what the Speaker of the House of Representatives is doing. He's not talking. He's looking for solutions to the problems. He's engaged us. I expect the Senate to to do same. The agitations you see in this country, they are not impossible to tackle. They come from local governments. Are you saying that some of the boys who are doing these things, if assuming they are Isoko people, we know them, we know their homes, we know their parents. What is the problem? They will tell you what the problem is. Right. A governor sits in the state capital. He needs the local government chairman to help. If the local governments are not functioning well, the state will not be progressive. The state will not be happy. The state will not function well. Okay. So the truth of the matter is that in any way we want to look at it, there are issues. We need to fundamentally agree that these issues to be solved must start from the local government. Because those who are benefiting from the center in terms of policymakers, policy molders, they are enjoying Abuja and enjoying the states. They don't care about the local government.
Honorable candidate has already issued some warning about those who are enjoying Abuja.
No, that is a topic that is very important to him. Yes, yeah, it's very important because you see, imagine it, I've never thought of that. That's an agitation that really needs to be discussed. An engagement.
Okay.
So for me, because I don't know, but we need to sit down. The National Assembly can drive the process. The governors should drive the process. Pick a few of them who are experienced.
No, but I don't know, gentlemen. Candido, you are here in the Federal Capital Territory, so it's the ministerial interaction that you guys have. What is the attraction for the stranglehold that most governors appear to have on local governments? I used to hear in the past that, oh, they needed control of local governments for electoral purposes. Oh, they needed local governments for... what is the attraction? If I ask, what is the attraction? In other words, what will be lost if local governments were freed and allowed to contribute to the growth and development of their respective states? Very quickly.
Very quickly. I'll give an example.
And I'll come back to Candido.
When Governor Wike was president of Algon, they took certain decisions, even before him. Don't forget, Algon at a point supplied vehicles for police in this country.
That's right, 774 of them.
I don't think a lot of people were happy about that. I don't think a lot of people were happy about that. The independence of the chairman, just like the governor or the president, to be able to say, look, this is what I want and I'll do it, is not very comfortable with many governors. But for a governor who has been in the local government, I know Governor Gandunji has been in local government. Governor Kowa is an example. He was secretary of local government. He was chairman of a local government. So you need to strengthen the local government, give them free hand and operate with them. Governor Wike, the same thing. So for the governors who have been in local government system, watch their governments. They are a little different because they know the capacity and the chairman and how free the chairman should be to add value. For goodness sake, if you are my governor and I'm chairman, and you are doing things in my local government, for instance, you bring a road project, you bring a water project from the state, will I not vote for you? I will join you in campaigning for the people to elect you. And that's how Kowa won his re-election in 2019. You see, I will be specific because I come from that state. You understand? I cannot speak for any other state. So that the governors will not say that, why didn't your Argon president speak about me? So let me speak about the one that I know.
Even if you did it, you are beyond query.
Nobody will query my colleagues who are Argon chairmen in the states. But the truth of the matter is that look specific, and anybody who has been in local government system and is not doing well as a governor, something is wrong.
Well, gentlemen, I don't want us to really narrow down the discussion to local government issues. We're talking about restructuring here. And when we look at it holistically as being put forward by most of you, we need to restructure. Agitations are there. People are talking. People are yearning for some change in the system. Now, how would the process look like? We at the moment have National Assembly, we have national dialogue, we have constitutional conferences and the rest of them. And all these are avenues of trying to bring about some change in the system and in the structure. We would like to hear your own views about this, but this is going to be when we come back from the break. Stay with us. As you were saying earlier before the break, we need to know exactly where do we start the restructuring from. Nigeria is made up of so many, over 200 million people, and of course they are being represented at the National Assembly from all facets, from all nooks and crannies. And of course these are people's representatives. If the people are really agitating for one thing or the other, I think the National Assembly will be one of the avenues for these agitations to go, so that they will be tabled and channeled and of course looked at. I asked this question earlier, and I think, gentlemen, we should be able to look at this individually and then hear what your perspectives are. What is going to be the process of restructuring? Candido.
Thank you once again, Nadabo. I think I've just said it clearly here that the National Assembly remains the only body, so to speak, that is supposed to be saddled with the responsibility of all issues ranging from agitations, restructuring, and what have you. The National Assembly, we have 2 national chambers, all represented by distinguished citizens of this country, and I think they have every reason to represent the interests of all the persons that are either agitating to leave or agitating to have this or that. Their brothers and sisters are making this plea, and I think they need every reason, they have every reason why they must sit down to tell themselves the naked truth, that here Nigeria is in problem, Nigeria is in trouble, and we need to find solutions to them. So for us for the restructuring to have any meaning at all, I think we must start with the National Assembly. They must sit up to do the right thing at the right time, and that is the moment for action now. Let me give you a little example. Nigerians all over will just woke up suddenly from last year to begin to talk about community policing. Community policing has been in existence for a very long time. I came in 2016 and I established what is synonymous to community policing. People were laughing at it, but of course it has come to bear now. What you have in AMAC as AMAC Marshal, they are just doing community policing. They must dive into the communities, fish out criminality, and report to conventional forces. That alone is community policing, because the people who are saddled with this job are also from such communities. And we didn't recruit them from anywhere. I didn't go to Edo, or I didn't go to Delta to bring persons that will do this assignment. So that alone itself, from the angle of local community security, have done some certain restructuring. So we need the National Assembly to be up and doing in this regard. We must find solutions to our issues so that we can have a country befitting of all of us. And that is where I think we should go. I wouldn't like to talk too much on this, because the national problem of this country is political. Political. Yes, we have issues that has to do with economy, financial and what have you, but the hallmark is political. Once people are agitating for wanting to belong to the system, please identify those issues and let them truly participate, so that their issues and concerns can be addressed, and then we can have a befitting country. Now, this is my concern.
How much have these agitations from AMAC, or how far has it gone to the representatives of the National Assembly from the FCT? I'm
happy we have 2 representatives. We have only 2 representatives representing the vast majority of people in the Federal Capital Territory. One in Abuja, where we call Abuja South, one in Abuja North. Just look at AMAC alone as an area council and Buhari put together. You will agree with me that this local government of the area council called AMAC is 3 times the size of a little state in this country, and is being represented by 1 member of House of Representatives. This is the area of shortchange we're talking about. Then the entire Federal Capital Territory that we have, how many millions of people do we have today in the Federal Capital Territory? A lot of millions of people, represented by only 1 senator. That itself tells you that we are being shortchanged. We're not talking of the indigenous in this case. You and me are now residents of this Federal Capital Territory. We need to be properly and adequately represented. You have a person representing your state in the Federal Executive Council. The FCT does not have. That is shortchanging. These are issues that agitate minds, and these are issues that tells you that something is wrong somewhere. Okay. So we are asking the National Assembly to look at all these matters. If only we want to find solution to our cases, we must nakedly look at our issues and then find solutions to them, so that once again we can have a country that we can all be proud of.
All right. Thank you very much, Honorable Candido. Mr. Festus Oguche, in our Port Harcourt network studios, Yes, the point has been made that restructuring is largely political, but there's also an economic dimension to it. One of the points of agitation has to do with an alteration of the current revenue sharing formula so that as states, that is the subnational entities, get more responsibilities, they also get a larger share of the revenue. That on its own would appear to be probably a straight line solution. If today there were to be an agreement to say, all right, federal government will get only 35%, states will get the balance, and local governments and so on and so forth. That would be a straight point. There is a deeper issue which sometimes we are either unwilling to confront or we shy away from. There's often talk about non-viability of some of the entities in Nigeria at the moment, that's to say as subnational entities. We have taken it as assumed that Nigeria is 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. But these states, after 1979, were creatures of the military. In any case, the 12-state structure was also a creature of the military. From 12 states, we went to 19 states. From 19 states, we went to 21. From 21, we went to 30. From 30, we went to 36. And then there's that little constitutional provision that talks about ministerial representation from each state. Assuming we were still just 21 states, we'll be having not more than 21 ministers, unless a government then says, oh, we're going to take 2 from each of the states. And then when you do this state by state, it creates problems. Some persons have argued that instead of talking about geopolitical zones, couldn't we also now be talking about geo-economic zones, which would also then form the basis for political representation? Some persons might argue that these are perhaps fundamental issues about restructuring. What's your take?
Yes, I think you captured it quite succinctly. When the idea of state creation came, people felt that it's an opportunity for them to get a government structure at their backyards, and then we started subdividing the country into tiny bits and pieces until they have a 36-state structure now. And like we earlier said, none of these structures, the majority of them are non-functioning in terms of viability, but they are just merely created for political purposes. And you also look at it on the background that even though they are creations that came as a precursor of certain demands and memoranda submitted by persons, they were essentially the amorphous acts of the military authorities then. There was not something that would say that it is right to propose a participatory platform upon which they are created. And this gives us a lot of problem, because now we have this 36-state structure, and people are talking about restructuring. Just like I pointed out earlier, what should be the basis of the restructuring? Will it be on the basis of those amorphous creations called states? Will it be on the basis of what? Now, you mentioned the issue of financial implications of restructuring, on whether, if at the end of the day, powers are devolved to the state structure, it also imply that a lot of the funds will go that way, which I think is neither here nor there, because even the funds that are allocated to states are being mismanaged. It doesn't trickle down to nothing. And I think it will be just being rather academic to consider that the proper thing to do is to give the states more financial prowess. We must be very tactful at this moment in time to ensure that we don't create structures, the strictures of our governance that will give people the opportunity to begin to mismanage funds or run the state of government affairs in the manner they want. Again, it must be pointed out that if we are now to look at it from a very proper perspective, as it is, the idea of restructuring is a function of which the National Assembly can expend their ideals, their debates on, and reach a proper focus. I think some of the voices that are being that express some dissent on that particular area arise from the fact that maybe the National Assembly members are not meeting up to the expectations of the people in terms of their functional approach, their approach to issues that are of very primary importance. It is very, very important to emphasize that we have a constitution. The constitution recognizes the dynamism of democracy and the dynamism of the constitution itself, that is amenable to amendment. It is susceptible to alterations here and there, and this has been going on for quite some time. It is not sacrosanct to look at the constitution from the point of view of whether it is functional or not. We can still look at it. The National Assembly can always look at it, but I don't think there should be any closed areas. We look at it from a holistic point of view with every objectivity in mind towards a tenacity that is achievable. I again want to emphasize that if you want to do a good and proper work on the restructuring of this country, it is not just transferring the legislative list, as you pointed out earlier. There are more underpinnings that are embedded therein, and it should involve, it should be a participatory process, because the Nigerians are the people. Within them lies the sovereignty of the country, and if anything is to be properly done, then we have to have access to our representatives and maybe have discussions with them and be provided the proper forum to ventilate our agitations and our ideas on what should be and what should not be. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Festus Oguche. Festus Oguche speaking to us from Port Harcourt studio. And of course, he's a constitutional lawyer and a social advocate. Well, thank you so much for appearing on Good Morning Nigeria today. I also must really thank Professor Mohamed Kabir Isa, Professor of Governance, Department of Local Government and Development Studies, Faculty of Administration, ABU Zaria. It's a pleasure having been part of us this morning. Thank you so much. We also have to really thank Honorable Adamu Abdullahi, that is Candido, Executive Chairman, Abuja Municipal Area, for being part of this program.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Itiapo Ikpopo. 100%. Honorable. Thank you so much for being part of this program this morning.
Thank you very much.
It's our pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
The name should be structured. No, I'm comfortable with it.
All right. We'd also like to thank our guests one more time, and then those who sent in their tweets. A number of issues you raised were touched on by the guests in the course of our conversation. We had to, of course, dispense with the second topic we're going to get on with at some point in time, and we'll probably return to that. So that's it for us today on Good Morning Nigeria. Deep thanks for tuning in. The program returns tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, do take care of yourself. I am Kingsley Osadolo.
And Yusuf Nadabusu. Bye-bye.